All right, we are back. Peanut Gallery, take it away.
Well, I guess we should talk a little bit about what's been going on here with AEW recently, and how far it's fallen in relation to what has been expected when the company was founded back in 2019.
Oh, do people remember that?
And I think the reason we need to talk about this is because there are a lot of shows coming up over the course of or has happened and will happen over the course of the next week or so that will give us a true indication of the state of the AEW as it exists today.
Yep.
Now, going back to 2019 and into 2020 when the companies were actually competing on Wednesdays, you remember that era of NXT, and you remember that era of AEW.
Oh, and by the way, a lot of those people that were on NXT, the main event for those NXT shows, are now in AEW.
Yes.
This was not the current NXT.
No, this was still the black and gold NXT, and I think that they didn't transition into the 2.0 brand until 2021, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
That's when they did all those mass releases between 2020 and 2021, when they fundamentally changed the landscape of NXT. People were thinking at the time that NXT was not going to do well, but here's NXT just...
Well, they had to get rid of the 2.0 aspect,
Yes.
and they did adjust it again, but there's still a lot of that.
A lot of the roster is still there, though, from the 2.0 rebranding.
Yep.
And during that time, a lot of those people, yes, they went over to AEW. And we can now see the results of that, of what's happening. And this just goes to show that it's not really about the talent, because the talent is there. It's about who's leading the talent. And that's the heart of the issue that people refuse to acknowledge, is that at the heart of the matter is the fact that the leadership within AEW is lacking. And there are a million examples of why and what's been seen with regards to these problems, I guess, if you want to call them problems, backstage.
Backstage issues. There have been issues, in front of people, and it's like the numbers don't lie, and I think that's why the cult of AEW hates numbers, because it doesn't hide anything. It can't hide anything.
Right. But going back to these recent head-to-heads. So let's take Saturday as an example.
Yeah, well, I mean, Tuesday's going to be the true head-to-head.
Right, Tuesday is going to be a true head-to-head. But Saturday really showed, I think, us a lot about what they're doing to kind of try and combat this issue. WWE didn't have to do anything. They just ran a regular premium live event.
Now, it's a premium live event compared to a show, so that's almost like comparing an apple to an orange.
Right, but again, this is why you don't run shows on Saturdays.
Yeah, you don't run shows on Saturdays. You don't do pay-per-views on Sundays. Like WWE switched it over to Saturdays for a reason.
Right, and it was a very good reason. It's because Saturday shows tend to do a lot better. And now that Endeavor is part of this whole spiel, it's very clear that they kind of want to keep those Saturday shows.
Yeah.
But they took a number of steps, and the results speak for themselves. Everyone saw the videos of the half-empty arena. Everyone saw the blatant, let's move an hour up so that we can compete with at least an hour worth of shows that don't have matches. Let's rely on these very, these very culpable tactics, such as, this is a great lead-in show to this, because the idea is that if you're competing with a product on the same night, that hopefully people will be too lazy to switch the channels when it would be very interesting. I'm very interested in seeing what the hour-by-hour numbers look like with regards to Collision, to see if all of a sudden at 5 o'clock our time, which would be 8 o'clock Eastern time, if those numbers drop significantly.
Absolutely. Yeah, but once again, that's what happens when you do a show on a Saturday. Of all days, you don't do a regular show on the weekend.
But
They did that with Saturday night's main event, and they dropped that shit quick because it wasn't doing anything.
right. And so that was just one example of these tactics that on the surface look like smart business moves, but at the same time, there's an air of desperation. Especially if you're competing with a product that most people will say, even most casual people will say, is superior product. And these pictures of these half-empty stadiums,
Half-empty is being nice.
half empty.
More like 60%.
But I think that I don't think it's going to look good for the presentation going forward.
But also, this doesn't. It's not just even that. You do realize that these executives who basically control this, they're looking at that and it's like, man, this brand is dying.
Right.
Why are we bothering?
And I think that a lot of sponsors look at that and say, this is we're gonna command less money. We will not pay the numbers that you want us to pay.
Or we'll go somewhere else
Right.
entirely because it's not worth it.
The return on investment is just not going to be worth it.
Pizza Hut had their thing on Fastlane for a reason.
Yes.
Because look at the building. There were like 14,000 people in there.
Right. And you can call it as hokey as you want to call it, but I see that and I see dollar signs going up.
Yeah. How about, it's not like there was there was in the past, but it doesn't affect the wrestling.
Right.
It's not like they're throwing pizza at each other anymore.
Right.
They used to. They were,
Yeah.
but they're not doing it now.
No.
They're just having a straight up match, but it's just like, oh, here's some sponsors. Why don't people bitch about that with football or
Right.
hockey or
Right.
or
Because
MMA?
it's really a lot the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the same as putting your name on the mat. It's the same as doing the sponsorships around the hockey rink. I mean, it's all there.
Yeah, it's there. Sometimes it's more subtle than others. WWE just kind of puts it in your face, but guess what?
That's just what they have to do in order to make the sponsorship work. But we're not talking about sponsorships. We're talking about these reactionary decisions being made, looking as if they are desperate to retain viewers.
Exactly.
Because at the heart of the matter, if there are less people watching, then the advertisers are not going to command any fees that are higher. They're going to want you to lower those fees because there are less people watching.
Yeah. And you think about it as a business perspective here.
Yeah.
This is not just, there aren't as many people in there. If I'm an executive and I see that, I'm like, why are we bothering? What are we doing here? And these arenas, they're like, why do we want that? I'll rent this space out to something else.
Exactly. That'll get more money. And I think that if we don't, I really think that we are going to see AEW start to run out of even smaller venues than they have because
they have to
of that
almost by
reason.
necessity.
Right. Because of that reason. I mean, there comes a point in time when it just becomes unsustainable. And I think that last night's Collision kind of proves that point, that this is not a sustainable model of doing business.
Right. It's not. I mean, clearly it's not. And the problem is, like, well, Tony Khan says, but the issue is that's not numbers.
Right.
How about you show us the revenue instead of just telling us what the revenue was?
Right.
It's almost like me saying that I can fly when nobody is looking.
Right.
You have to go based on what I say.
Right. And WWE being a public company, of course,
they have to disclose it.
Disclose their revenues. And they do. But AEW
proudly.
Yeah, AEW does not. But you kind of have to ask those questions. You have to ask those really hard questions. It's like, is it worth it? And I think from a perspective of a business person, it's not worth it.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't put my money with AEW. I'm sorry. I just wouldn't.
And 2019 AEW, I would. 2023 AEW.
Right. Yeah,
You're just looking at a bloated roster full of half-baked wrestlers. Half of them are older.
And a money mark on daddy's money.
Right.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and that's kind of, and I think we're going to see it manifest more and more as the year goes on. But, it's just not looking so good right now for Collision, for AEW. because they are getting desperate. I think that they're starting to get more and more desperate as time goes on.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's just going to get worse before anything happens.
Yep.
So that's all I have to say. Do you have anything else to add?
Nope. I think that was pretty clear. So when we come back, we're going to be talking about Fastlane.